Hey, y'all. Well, that didn't go quite the way we had hoped, did it? But do you get the feeling like the other side's got buyer's remorse? Yeah, I all my liberal buddies don't really seem super delighted that Joe won. I don't know why. Maybe they're gonna miss making fun of Trump. I don't know. But hey, Joe's pretty darn lackluster. I watching the inauguration, which was painful. I think a bunch of us were kind of hoping somebody would show up and haul all those guys away, but that didn't happen. But nobody there looked very happy. I mean, you've seen Bernie and his look, and and there's that weird moment where like nothing happened before the swearing in, and people were looking around kind of worried. It was weird. Uh, Lady Gaga, yeah, and all the different guests. It just is weird. Obviously, with some 25, 30,000 troops all assembled around the Capitol and the fencing, and when they drove in there, it looked like something out of a prison in the Middle East. It was just the strangest thing I've ever seen. And of course, as soon as Joe gets in office, he immediately starts to sign all those executive orders, getting rid of so much good work. I don't understand the appeal, like getting rid of the Keystone Pipeline project. Why? And those are union jobs. I thought Joe was all about union jobs. But everything I've seen him do, join the Paris Accord again, and what are we going to start flying cash over to Iran next thing? It's really odd, and for a guy that keeps telling us that he wants to be a president for everyone, and then he talks about white supremacists and stuff like that. Like, we all get it, Joe. You're calling Trump supporters a bunch of racist bigots, and we really resent that. We're anything but. We're for all Americans, truly. If you recall, Trump's policies were beneficial to all Americans, especially the Americans in the middle class. They're trying to make something of themselves. It's not something you see the left do. They talk about it, but I defy you to find me a program that has actually helped people make their way back up. It's all designed to kind of keep you down, keep you at a level where you can't really succeed. Look at what they do with education. It's failing people. Look how they treat jobs or employers. No respect. And it's going to be really obvious. We've grown accustomed to even throughout COVID. People were aching to get their businesses back open and get back in the fight. And maybe we'll see COVID start to roll away. They suggest that we've got to keep the economy strong, and I don't see anything that Joe's doing that indicates that he's going to help business grow or really help the economy. But obviously, if they start to take away some of the COVID restrictions, that's gonna unleash a lot of potential, and it should really help. But it's only going to help for a little while, especially with all the regulations they want to bring back into the picture. I don't really get the appeal of the left, to be honest with you. I mean, it used to be about recognizing everybody and giving everyone a voice, and all that stuff's fine. I mean, that no one is against any of that, but they seem to be very anti-capitalism. They seem to be very anti-American. Those are other programs they're scrubbing. The 1776 project, stuff like that. Now they'd rather bring in their own socialist point of view instead of the actual history of the United States. It's just the kind of thing we expect out of them. And I think watching the inauguration and watching the actions that they're taking, it just brings that back home. You're like, oh yeah, it's those guys. It's when government won't get off your back, when government's always in your way, when government wants more money, and you watch them. I mean, my gosh, as soon as they have the ability, you see what kind of bills they pass. So, well, we'll give you $600, and then we're going to give tens of millions to these people who hate us and want to blow us up. Like, that's going to make friends. It never has. And you got to wonder, hey, what's the point? What are they trying to get at? Well, as we went through the whole after the election quandary of, well, what happened? And, we've heard from the left, well, nothing. It was a fair and honest election, and you guys just lost, and you're just going to have to suck it up. And then, we heard from everybody. I mean, all the way from Mike Lindell to Navarro. I mean, all these people coming up with all this proof. I mean, really, it is. If it's not like we caught you, stabbing the guy kind of proof, at least it's pretty darn convincing proof that there was some major fraud that took place in this election. I mean, not just inconsequential. I mean, like, changed the results kind of fraud. But, we've still, in Arizona for well over a month, they've been trying to get an audit done, and they keep blocking them for all kinds of weird reasons. I thought it was going to happen back on the 21st. And then I read where, well, we haven't really agreed on everything. Oh, we're concerned about, well, maybe people's identities will get out, something like that. I mean, it's like, well, yeah, maybe the identity, like, maybe they're dead and they moved away and they're underaged and, all these other things, maybe that would be harmful. I don't know. I would like to see some of these audits get done. I'd like them to take a look at the machines and the ballots. And that's not unreasonable. I mean, that's I think, within, I think it's even in the law that we're supposed to be able to verify these votes. But it's being fought. And you have to ask yourself, what's the fight about? I mean, you've got your guy in office. But let's take a look. Well, and it's sort of down the same line of thought. So the impeachment, right, which is just ridiculous. They want to impeach Trump, who's now not the president. They did impeach him in the House, right, in record speed, over inciting a riot, right? The people that raided the House during the vote or the Electoral College vote, they're insisting, well, these are Trump people. And, I've watched the videotapes. I'm sure you have too. They don't look like Trump people. I'm sorry. If just putting on a MAGA hat and a red shirt doesn't make you a Trump person. Trump people act differently. Look at all these rallies with tens of thousands of people. There's no violence. There's no record of violence with Trump people. There just isn't. There is a huge record of violence with all these, what would you call them, anarchists? That's really what they are. I mean, Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all, they're a bunch of Marxists. I mean, yeah, there's a core message that might be a decent message, but their delivery is a little different than their message, right? It's not bringing peace. I mean, if you look at them in Seattle or Portland, they're rioting. They rioted all summer. Biden gets elected, and they're rioting again. They're setting things on fire. Didn't make any difference. So who do they stand for? Well, they stand for nothing. I mean, anarchy is all about get rid of the government, knock everything down, let people rule themselves kind of deal, right? But we're supposed to believe that these are Trump people now, all of a sudden. And I'll bet you anything. The FBI certainly knows who these people are. There's been countless cameras on these guys all summer long, all over the country. We know that they're taking flights, they're on buses. I mean, we saw a whole busload of Antifa people, several busloads of Antifa people come in, on the 6th and line up, and I'm pretty sure a lot of those are the people that stormed into the Capitol. Because you could see the Trump people outside, pointing at them, saying, hey, that's Antifa, that's Antifa. But we're supposed to all believe that those are Trump people that caused all this problem. And we're supposed to believe that these politicians were just shaken to the core to the point where they just could no longer follow the Constitution and just had to go ahead and vote for old Joe. It's the most ridiculous thing, and I feel insulted. I do. I mean, not only in that they're running over our rights, but insulted to think that we're all that stupid. I mean, so certainly let the impeachment proceedings carry through the Senate, and let's have an opportunity to bring up some facts. Let's have the opportunity to take a close look at the whole thing. And I'm sure at this point they know every single one of those guys and who they are and where they came from. And we can look into their record. We can see if they've done things in the past that don't seem to support Trump. And then maybe we could make the assumption that maybe they weren't supporting Trump this time. They just want chaos. That's my thought. And the other thing is, whose responsibility is it to make sure that the security is right? That's supposed to be one of the most closely guarded buildings in America. And these guys didn't have weapons. They just pushed their way in. When does that happen? I mean, that's nuts. Unless they're sort of invited in, right? And if you watched the videos, I mean, the cops didn't really give much of a fight. But like I said, who's in charge of these cops? Who's in charge of security? Well, it all ends up that actually falls under Nancy Pelosi. As the Speaker of the House, and she has been the Speaker for a long time, and she's certainly been there in the House for a very long time. She certainly knows what's required, right? She's been there. She knows what it takes, and she didn't do it. So I don't know if she knew this was going to happen or not. I sort of suspect she did. But she sure didn't do a very good job. And then lo and behold, the very next day, they start setting up this huge perimeter fence and bussing in all these National Guard guys. And all of a sudden now they're serious about security when it's time to swear in old Joe. Very odd. I mean, as they say, the optics aren't good. So anyway, they want to do that. They want to impeach Trump, even though he's no longer president, because I guess they think that if they do that, he'll never be able to come back. And, again, the thing they always miss is it's not about Trump. It's about us. It's about the American people. The reason we're so for Trump is he was so for us. So, you're basically trying to impeach half the population. And we don't like it. Imagine that. Just like you guys didn't like it when Trump became president, you immediately set about trying to get rid of him, and we noticed that, So the first impeachment was a total crock. And of course, as the president leaves office, he releases all the documents to basically show us the truth. What was the Russian collusion about, right? And then it ends up the whole thing was basically paid for by the Clinton campaign. And everybody in the FBI and CIA at the upper levels knew exactly who these people were and what happened, who paid for what. I mean, they knew it was a big crock, and they totally went with it. They let this take control of the presidency. And here they are again. They want to do this impeachment in record time yet again. I think they're talking about 3 days, maybe in the Senate, to somebody who's not even in office. It's absurd. It's absolutely nuts, but we're all supposed to just accept that. Well, as I mentioned, there's already an impeachment being brought upon Joe. And it has to do with those old videotapes that we've all seen, where Joe was so proud of the fact that he wouldn't pay the Ukraine the money until they got rid of the one justice, I think, there in the Ukraine. And, and then he got his way. I guess it was prosecutor, something like that. I can't remember exactly who it was, right? But he got his way. And he's very pleased with himself that worked out for him. But that really is unacceptable. I mean, that's not how you're supposed to use your position as vice president, or president for that matter. But they swept that under the rug like, that's just Joe being Joe and getting it done. And, but look at all the stuff we found out, right? Since then, we've found out that, they've been, his son anyway, has been getting a great deal of money out of the Ukraine. and also out of Russia and out of China and a bunch of other places. And then lo and behold, Hunter's laptop and all the information in that, we find out that it's very likely that Joe and the rest of the family are getting paid off from these leads as well. And of course, the only reason money's passing hands is because they're trying to buy influence. They're soaking the money so that Joe will basically come their way and see things their way. And, that's illegal. You're not supposed to do that. But especially when you reach the level of president. So imagine, Joe finally gets in there. He's wanted to be president forever, right? I mean, he's been working there for dang near 50 years. He finally gets in there after, helping impeach the previous guy. And then what would happen if all of a sudden it turns around and he's impeached and he's all discovered to be a filthy liar instead of Trump? Then what do we do, right? And then what happens if, while he's being impeached and all this information's being brought to light about how he's been basically grifting his way throughout his politics for all these years, what if then we find out, hell, we finally got around to auditing all these voting machines, and it looks like, yeah, these things were turning the vote to Joe. And, this doesn't look very good. And all these ballots, there's a bunch of fake ballots here. What happens if all this comes up at once? Does Kamala get the position? I don't know. How does it work? I mean, for the longest time, I've been talking about how I'm seeing all this election fraud. I'm reading all these reports, and I'm inclined to believe them because we've got a long record of this happening. And as everyone says, well, it's never been enough to change the actual results of an election. But, I mean, how in the world do we know? We haven't taken a serious look at this in a long time. 15 years ago, Carter and his commission had basically turned in guidelines on how to straighten out a vote and make sure it's straight up. And we never followed any of those recommendations. And they basically broke every single one of them in this most recent election. So if any of them try to tell you at this point they're going to take a serious look at it and fix it, they're full of it. Because every time they do that, they just kind of use that as a map on how to cheat in the next election. So none of us feel like there's going to be a fair election from here on out, unless something really dramatic happens, because there's no willingness. The places where we've saw all this fraudulent voting take place are always going to be a problem, and it's always going to be the decision making will be in the hands of these 6 swing states. And that's basically why we have the Electoral College in the first place, is so that it doesn't just come down to a handful of big population centers and the rest of the country is ignored. But that's what they're trying to do. And so if they couldn't get rid of the Electoral College, then, well, we'll just fix the machines to the point where it doesn't make any difference anyway. And that's the feeling I get. Now, I know there's been a lot of the Q stuff blowing around. I brought this up last time, and I watched some of that stuff too. It's a neat story. It'd be kind of cool if some of that stuff were to come true, but like I said, it always seems to be kind of coincidental. But I think they're kind of onto something. They do look really hard for clues of what's going on, and I don't think it's that hocus pocus, but there are things to keep your eye on here. And like I said, the questions behind how legitimate was the vote, how legitimate is Joe? Is Joe really on the take? Does he really receive money from foreign countries? Did he really participate in spying on the Trump campaign? You remember, that's what got Nixon in all that trouble, right? You remember. What has he done to achieve this level of presidency? It doesn't really look great to me. I think there's a lot of ways for Joe to lose his position, because not only do I think that he's broken laws, but I'm seeing the kind of work that he's doing right now, and it's it's not liberal. It's hardcore leftist. I mean, the socialist side of the party is definitely pushing Joe's buttons. He told us that he would be, you know, sort of the more conservative side of the Democrat Party, and as soon as he got in there, that's not what he's being. He is really pushing the super progressive, ultra leftist point of view. All of these executive orders he signed absolutely confirm that. So I think maybe that's why I see some of my liberal friends not super excited over what they see. And of course, us Trump people are just disgusted with what we see. And, I guess because of all that, we keep looking at these stories and looking for hope. It's like, well, could our guy still come back somehow and save the day? Because, we want that because we're doing good. We're really getting somewhere. And of course, the dang virus comes in and messes things up really bad last year. And, we were starting to make a little progress. We've got the vaccine out there, which, and that's a funny thing, right? So they get this vaccine together in record time, and they do the distribution and they set things up ahead of time. But as you recall from the summer, the states are on their own. They make their own decisions. And so just like this summer, if they don't want to bring in the National Guard to stop these riots, the National Guard doesn't go in there. They have to request it, right? Well, it's sort of the same deal with the vaccine. It's up to them. The government gives them, here's some guidelines and here's some thoughts, but it's up to the states to figure out how they're going to do this. And they just didn't. They didn't. And so now they're all acting like, well, Trump never did any of this stuff. But they didn't do it. And so now they're like, they're trying to rename it. It's not warp speed anymore. Now it's going to be Joe speed. I don't know. But, here we are again. It's that kind of pretzel logic where, well, it's not my fault, it's his fault. Now it's his fault. It's just get the job done, y'all. Just get it done. But I'm not feeling like there's anyone there other than maybe Pelosi. She gets things done, but it's not for us, is it? It's the agenda that she gets done. You never see them trying to help people out directly. It's not. They give us those crumbs, as she likes to say, but the real meat and potatoes is going over here to the special interests, to to whatever it is that they're fond of at the moment that's going to get them some really great relationship that's going to line their pockets, basically. So, what we're seeing is the same old government junk back. Doesn't respond to the people. It spends a ton of money. It lies. It's just the same old. And so maybe even the left is starting to realize, like, oh, it's that thing again. I certainly realize it. I'm not enjoying it. But, we'll see what we got. I don't know if any super magic, wonderful things can happen, like, oh, the military is going to rise up and take Joe out. But it is worth noting, from listening to a bunch of those guys and reading a lot of this stuff, one of them, I wish I had printed it out, but I didn't. But it mentioned that really the only way you can get rid of somebody like Joe, and that whole, we'll call it a movement behind him, is you got to actually sue him in D.C., and there's a special mechanism that allows it, and I need to look into that some more. Obviously the courts didn't want to touch this stuff, and there's a lot of speculation on why. Some has to do with maybe some of the arrangements made after the World Wars and the Depression. That's a very complicated path to go down. That basically laws changed after that, and so we can't really look at some of the original laws as specified in the Constitution because it's changed somewhat since then. But there's this one provision, and it has to be done right there in D.C. And I believe that's where a lot of this stuff would play out. So if, let's say, impeachment proceedings are brought against Joe. And at the same time, we find that the machines were rigged. And at the same time, we find out that Nancy knew all about this raid on the Capitol building and may have even helped facilitate it. Or if maybe those people that came in there are proven to have no interest in Trump whatsoever. You know, if we stack all this stuff up, then you have to say, well, who's going to be in charge of the hen house? And it would have to be the military, I assume. And maybe if we had a fraudulent election, you know, I don't know if we have another election or if maybe there was a way to figure out what the actual results were. You know, I'm not sure. It's all that kind of stuff is so confusing. But there seems to still be a path out there for something like that to happen. So, yeah, you know, I don't know if we're going to have any super wonderful magic computer from, you know, 3 levels or 5 levels of chess and all this. I don't know. But there's just the regular old boring stuff, legal actions that would maybe get us there. You know, I kind of hope it happens because I hate the way things are starting to look already. You know, I don't like the way that the old government does things. You know, we seem to be dead last in their considerations, and you know, I'm starting to see indications that they want to get back to that as fast as they possibly can. So I imagine, you know, the stock market should be nosing down, but it's not. And I think people are kind of holding on for a while. But the stuff they're doing isn't going to help business. So they're going to have to pull back on the COVID thing, and that'll work for a while. But eventually, you know, if you're not watering and fertilizing your plants, they don't do well. And, you know, I think our economy is going to become very stagnant. And I just find all that kind of depressing to think about. But that's just kind of how it is when things change like this. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a little optimistic that maybe we can still straighten this out, but I'm not holding my breath for any, you know, Q magic. But I will continue to read their stories. It's, you know, it's sort of like reading about Superman or Spider-Man. You know, it's like, hey, these are super people, you know, and this would be really neat if somebody could come in and save the day. But I've never seen that in my life, so I don't expect to see it now. But on the bright side, there's still a path, and I'm not completely crazy. I don't think. Maybe. Anyway, thanks for listening, and have a great day.